You know, Ryan Mcbeth, we welcome him to the broadcast for the first time. He's an intelligence analyst, software architect, and cybersecurity expert. Sam Faddis, editor of WND Magazine, who's a regular on the broadcast. Let me welcome you both to the show. Sam, what has you concerned around the world as it relates to our foreign policy?
Wow, everything, Armstrong. I don't. Look, this is the most disastrous administration in American history from a national security perspective. And it's not just incompetence. It's, quite frankly, we got a lot of people in very senior positions that I think are in bed, at least philosophically, with many of our most ardent opponents. So we are in grave danger, and I am very concerned that we're going to be trundling along with this mindset that, you know, one of these days we're going to pay a price, and then we're going to discover that one of these days is today.
You know, what do you think are the primary methods used by Russia today to infiltrate Western media?
One of the terms that I like to use is the term counterfeit conservative. Essentially, these are people that Russia pays in order to push a Russian narrative under the guise of being having genuine conservative principles, when actually they are sort of like a kabuki mask, this fake mask of being a conservative that's actually pushing Russia's misinformation or disinformation as Russia sees fit, which we just recently saw with Tenet. That's probably the most dangerous thing.
Well, how do they know which stories to promote in order to shape public opinion that they will absolutely work?
That's actually a very good question. I think that's why I use the shotgun approach. That's why in a case like Tenet Media, you have 6 different people who can push a narrative. So ideally, they have 3 phases: seeding, harvesting, and amplification. In the seeding phase, they push out information to various groups. Not just groups like Tenet, but it could just be what are called sophists, people who just believe in the Russian cause and they're not getting paid. And they're trying to find what works. Once they find that thing that works, then they start amplifying it using their network of paid bots and sophists. And that's where things kind of get dangerous, because now they're waiting for someone like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to retweet what they're saying. So that's kind of how it works. They use that shotgun approach, and they might specifically target individual people. It's called the magic disinformation kill chain, with magic standing for make, initiate, generate. Where they the magic disinformation kill chain, where you make your target, you create the user base that you're going to actually attack. You're going to generate the information. You're going to initiate the actual operations, and then you're going to cascade that amplification out. So they'll specifically target certain individual groups, send out different kinds of disinformation, see what works, and have different kinds of target packages for each target.
You know, Sam, why is it that Russia makes it clear that if Western weapons are used by Ukraine and Russia, it will escalate and change the war trajectory?
Well, look, the Russians are bleeding to death in Ukraine. I mean, it doesn't mean that the Ukrainians are going to march into Moscow tomorrow. I'm not suggesting any such thing, but look, they initiated an operation that they probably expected within 72 hours going to put them in Kiev. That was years ago. And then they were going to declare a client state before the West could react and turn it into Belarus, et cetera. Okay, instead of, the blitzkrieg, they ended up in trench warfare from World War I. They're pulling 40-year-old T-62 tanks that were obsolete when I was an armor officer. a long time ago, Armstrong. Right, we would have killed those things on the battlefield by the dozens and thought nothing of it because they were junk already. That's what they're down to. So they are bleeding to death. They are not winning this war. Again, that doesn't mean that the Ukrainians are going to achieve a decisive victory. It's just turned into something that Vlad didn't want and he can't afford. And the idea that we're now going to ramp this thing up and begin to enable the Ukrainians to carry out these kinds of strikes on Russian soil is really, really a big deal for him. Now, that is not me endorsing the idea that we should give them these missiles and authorize them to use this way. As you know, I think we ought to be talking this thing down and resolving the conflict, not looking for ways to escalate it. But this is a big problem for Putin. He is not winning.
Let me just do this, Sam. We've got about a minute and a half left before break. Why is it that there seems to be as much talk from the Biden administration about a ceasefire and the vice president that we're close? It seems like we are pushed much further away. What is missing in the narrative that's being put out?
We're not trying to end the war. Look, I get it. We're pressed for time. Vladimir Putin's bleeding to death and is relying on North Korea and Iran to supply munitions. Zelensky cannot fight if we don't write the checks. So it ought not be the hardest thing in the world to force these people to the table and make them negotiate. Now, I don't expect in 5 minutes you're going to have a resolution, but you could end this war if you wanted to, because we sort of hold all the cards. We don't want to end it, and we're not trying to end it.
And boy, let's really pray on that and come back. Don't go away. And welcome back to the broadcast. It's interesting, Ryan. The vice president continues to push this Project 25. Even across at the Heritage Foundation, we covered recently where they had these ministers talking about how Project 25 is a threat to our moral fiber. And I was just astounded about how the clergy have become useful tools of the Democratic Party. What is missing in this conversation about Project 25?
Well, Project 2025 is something they do every year. It's something the Heritage Foundation does every 4 years. They come up with a playbook if a conservative president gets elected. So ideally, like, hey, here's some policies you should implement. Here's a list of judges that you might consider adding to the federal bench. The specific disinformation that I found was people were saying things were inside of Project 2025 that weren't actually there. Things like banning the teaching of slavery in schools. That wasn't actually in the document. It's not there. But there were people who came up with information, specifically an infographic that was shared over 5.3 million times with this level of misinformation. So that's one of those examples of lies. Other examples include things like preventing access to contraception. There is nothing inside Project 2025 that says contraception needs to be banned. But these were specific trigger words that were generated by maybe a non-state actor, I'm not quite sure yet, but certainly by someone on the left who wanted to take this Project 2025 document and scare the pants off of people, that if Trump gets elected, this document's going to be implemented. And as we know, President Trump kind of does what President Trump thinks is best. No one's going to tell him what to do. That includes the Heritage Foundation.
Sam, it seems as though the mainstream media would do a better job are covering the crises that we face abroad: Iran, Israel, Ukraine, Russia, China, Kim Jong-un. But why? Is it because they don't understand the depths of the issue? Is it because it's an election year and they don't want to do anything to cripple Vice President Harris's perception of ascendancy to the White House? What is it?
Well, as usual, I think there's more than one factor at play. It is definitely the case that, you know, we don't have journalists of the caliber that we used to. Most major publications don't have foreign correspondents on the ground in New Delhi full time, that kind of thing. That, you know, it's all about sound bites, and most of the content you see on the internet is a repetition of one article. You'll read 100 articles and realize they're all the same article, so nobody's doing independent research. But having said that, look, there is a clear ideological issue here. Yes, you have the major networks, the legacy media, completely in the tank, functioning, in my opinion, as basically propaganda outlets for the Democrat Party. So as an example, one tiny example, China and the Philippines are about 30 seconds away from a shooting war. The Chinese have seized big chunks of territorial waters that by international law clearly belong to the Filipinos. They're ramming Filipino ships. They're threatening them all of the time. And literally, I mean, while we're doing this broadcast, you could find out there's been an exchange of fire. Okay, these guys, the Philippines, are treaty allies of ours. We're completely bound legally and morally to defend them. We're doing nothing. And I defy most Americans, or you really have to dig to even know that any of this is going on. And that's one tiny example. Why? Because it's not flattering. The Houthis have closed the Red Sea and are winning the war against the United States Navy at sea. No offense to the sailors who were fighting with both arms tied behind their back. No American is waking up and finding that as front page news, and we could go on down this list forever.
Faddis, Ryan, we'll be back. So much more to talk about. Such an insightful look into foreign policy and what is being ignored, while America's foreign policy is just in tatters around the world. We'll be back.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence, there's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion, and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. Let me come back to you and Ryan. It is fascinating how propaganda from the Chinese and the Russia contributes to the polarization of U.S. politics. How does this spread? How can it stop? Why are they so effective at it? And can we also ask this? Are we doing the same in other parts of the world?
That's an excellent question. So to start, one of the reasons it's so effective is that we have free speech in this country. You know, the adversaries use our rights against us. And, you know, in all honesty, I don't want to live in a country where someone tells me what to think. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't ways of fighting this. One of the things that I've advocated for is to treat disinformation factories, which is what they are disinformation factories, to treat them as targets. If you want to, if you're going into work every day building ammunition for an adversary, that is a valid target. So if you're going into a factory that is producing disinformation that will aid the adversary into winning a war, then you are a valid target. So that is one method of countering that. A second method might be making that correct information available. You know, currently in the US, we don't really, and this is one huge problem that we have, we don't really have a lot of veterans around that can explain how the military works. So if someone sees a video on TV, they go, "Oh wow, that's a war crime. Look what that Ukrainian soldier did. He just struck that unarmed Russian soldier with a drone. That's a war crime." Well, most veterans know, look, you know, the person wasn't actively trying to surrender. The person wasn't wearing a clearly marked red cross. They're a valid target. But Russia can take our lack of knowledge, and China can do this as well. They can take our lack of knowledge and exploit that and say, look what kind of people you're supporting when you're sending money to Ukraine. So how do you fight it? Well, one of my suggestions was kinetically. The other is have trusted sources. You know, there are people out there like me who work every day to explain how the military works and how weapon systems work. And read as much as you can about how things actually work so that they can't pull the wool over your eyes.
You know, Sam, fascinating piece by you in A&D magazine. Your new neighbors, Tren de Aragua. Talk about the Venezuelan gangs.
Right. So these guys are all over the United States now, and you will see news articles sporadically about them. These are the guys taking over apartment complexes in Colorado, and I think now in a whole bunch of other states. What I think is what is missing from this, and we try to point this out in the article I wrote, is that it kind of gets portrayed as if these guys are a bunch of gangbangers on the block with guns stuck in their waistband. Sort of, look, they're thugs and they're bad guys, but this is just kind of sporadic and incidental. That's not at all what these guys are. These guys are an officially designated transnational criminal organization. They took over a major prison in Venezuela. And by take it over, I mean they took it over and held it for years and turned it into their headquarters. So it took 11,000 Venezuelan soldiers with tanks to retake that prison. Pretty close to a full division of troops to go in and retake the prison. So that gives you a clue as to the scope of what we're talking about. When they flushed these guys out, they didn't catch the leadership, and they basically scattered, and they've spread all throughout South America by this point and into a number of countries. But, you know, the golden opportunity was the borders are now open in the United States. The prison fell in last fall, 2023, late 2023. So the borders are wide open. So they have come north. They are not just a handful of guys, 6 guys here, 6 guys there. They are still under the command of all the same original leaders, and they have really big ambitions. One of the videos circulating online is one of these guys talking about how give us 2 years and the United States is done. Okay, he's talking a lot of smack. I'm not endorsing his comment. It's an insight into their ambition. He's not saying we'll take over this apartment building. He's saying we plan on spreading coast to coast and running this place. So it is a huge deal, and it's going to get a lot worse.
Ryan, that sounds frightening.
He's not wrong. He's not wrong. One of the kind of the differences is that we didn't expect this particular gang to get that violent that fast. And one of the things that they're good at is coordinating with their diaspora, because so many people have left Venezuela. I believe 8 million people just in the past couple of years. So they have this huge diaspora of people to draw from. when they want to commit these criminal acts. And it used to kind of be that if there was a mafia, like the Italian mafia, they were there to offer protection, right? To the people in the neighborhood. So you might pay them $5 every week so they don't bust up your store, but they're also keeping the drug dealers off the streets. These particular Venezuelan gangs aren't doing that. They're not shaking down mom and pop groceries. They're going into Macy's and stealing dresses and using their diaspora to find people that'll do that. And then the major gang members will go sell that stuff. But yeah, you're absolutely, you're right. This was not a problem that we thought about a year ago.
So is that why Gavin Newsom finally passed the $50,000 marker? If you still go into these stores and you steal beyond $50,000, when they're putting this law back into place, you're going to be arrested? That's why we have that law?
That would probably be fairly useful, but I know that these smash and grab robberies where people are grabbing all sorts of clothes, and when I was in California, it happened to me while I was at 7-Eleven. Yeah, the hotel I was just in California speaking at a conference. I went across the street to get some coffee from my hotel, and two guys came in with 2 bags, and they just started piling stuff inside the bags, and I guess they hope it doesn't get above $1,000, and
But
they
isn't
left.
that crazy? If it gets above 2 cents, I don't care if it's 2 cents or $2 million, the crime should be the same as stealing.
I mean, we're talking about California. I mean, look, the weather's nice and weed is legal, right? So why not just let people do what they want? I don't necessarily believe in that, but that seems to be the attitude in California.
I'm Armstrong Williams, and we'll be back.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
Sam Faddis, I can't help but keep thinking about what you said about, they said, give us a couple of years. But it's like they just keep chipping away at our democracy, at our value systems, our institutions. And at some point, if they're not slowed down, or forced to go somewhere else because we're not going to tolerate this, they may not take over America, but they'll destroy and shake its foundation so badly it could become unrecognizable.
Yeah, well, in the world of intelligence, Armstrong, just to sort of use that as an analogy, if you will, one of the issues you have all the time is you get all these sort of indicators and warnings, and bad things happen and bad reports come in, and people are generally conscious on some level that we're heading in a bad direction, but somehow or another the horizon just keeps receding. You keep pushing this out. One of these days it's going to get really bad. I mean, look, we had war plans to deal with the Japanese prior to December 7th, 1941, because the general concept that they were expansionists, given what they were already doing, was no secret, and the idea that we might end up in a conflict with them was not, it wasn't like nobody ever thought about that. Didn't change the fact that all of a sudden we experienced a catastrophe, because while we were still thinking one of these days it's going to get bad, we discovered one of these days was today. I think that's, and we can use all sorts of other historical parallels, I think that's where you are right now. It's not like one of these days things are going to get really, really bad. On a whole variety of fronts, things are really bad right now, today.
And that's what we're going to end this broadcast on. It is here. And it's not going to get any better unless we get better. Ryan and Sam, thank you so much for joining us for this edition of the Armstrong Williams Show.
Thank you.
Yeah.